Hi everybody, this is a film about a practice we're going to be using a lot throughout the course called inquiry. So inquiry is a kind of talking meditation, and it's something that we've mentioned on the channel a few times. It's got some similarities to circling, which we've mentioned, which is a kind of relational practice. Inquiry is a little bit different, and we're going to go into it in more detail, but essentially it links very closely to something else we've talked about on the channel a lot, which is collective intelligence. This ability for us to make sense together and individually and have a kind of inquiry or a conversation that is very different to what we'd normally do, where we're trying to tell a story. An inquiry is really a process of coming into a deep curiosity with whatever's happening or around a certain topic and not necessarily knowing what the answer is. And so we're going to explain what it is in a bit more detail, and we're also going to model it in this film so that you have a bit of a better understanding of how to use this practice. So to help us do that, Ivo, you have a huge amount of experience with this practice. So what is inquiry?
Yeah, inquiry is a psychotechnology that's been used in various wisdom traditions over the ages. The particular one that we're going to be using has its background in the Ridwan school, which is a form of, you could say, real-time sense-making of your present experience. It's a practice that is quite transformative because they found out that when people speak in the now and struggle to find words for their experience, it actually becomes transformative. They found this doing research in talk therapies, and the people that were actually able to bring themselves to that point, that liminal zone of sense making, like what is this felt sense of struggling to give words to the experience. For them, the therapy proved very, very helpful. The people that were not able to do that kind of stayed in what they knew, in the known, in their story, so to speak. For them, talk therapy was usually not that helpful. So what we're trying to do here is bring our presence into the now as we are sharing in what the present experience is, as we're, for example, inquiring into a question. So bringing yourself to that place where your experience unfolds, like in the moment, and often the body is a big part of that. Like the body is a great starting point because it's always in the now, just like our breath is always in the now. So it's a wealth of information. And if we can follow the unfoldment of whatever wants to happen, our truth, then we can come to new perceptual territory and start to make new sense of ourselves and sense of the old self, our reactivity, which is very important for sovereignty and sense making, of course.
So for me, inquiry often feels like following lots of subtle threads, almost like being a detective of my experience. Or I've heard it said as kind of being like a connoisseur of your own experience. And so as I'm talking during inquiry, I might feel a certain sensation, and the attitude of curiosity is maybe the most important quality to play with and cultivate, because as something comes up, the curiosity sort of leads me towards a thread of, okay, I notice that as I say that, I'm getting maybe a slight feeling of being a little bit detached, or I'm getting a slight feeling of something in my shoulder, I'm not quite sure what it is, and then might go into that. And what often happens is that it transforms, and it's actually quite an exciting process, because the curiosity and kind of moving with those threads and following those threads usually leads me somewhere I really didn't expect. And that's for me why is one of the reasons that the practice is so valuable, I think, for a lot of people, is that when we come into looking at ourselves or looking at a question and trying to make sense of something with this attitude and this practice, we go to new places with it. And so it's literally live sense making in a lot of ways. And that's the process of doing it. And of course, in this situation, we're doing it with another person, which is very often the way we do it. We have a witness. And so when it's one-to-one, the witnessing is also not just a passive experience. As you're talking, I'm sitting, and I'm very present with you. And presence is one of the principles we're using on the course, but it's also one of the main qualities to practice and cultivate when listening to someone, inquiring. So while I'm listening, I'm not responding either. I'm not sort of overlaying my experience by saying like, oh, wow, yeah, it's like that for me too. Or, yeah. So the practice while listening is to be actively listening, but not interfering. So even, or, sometimes there's a slight pressure to kind of mirror someone or nod. And the invitation is, and the practice is to try and minimize that as much as possible. You don't have to be a robot, but equally it helps to just be in a state of witnessing presence. And that applies as well as if we're doing it over Zoom with a pod. It's really just really giving the presence. And that presence really helps the person inquiring to feel like they have time, space to go wherever they need to go.
So we boiled inquiry down to 4 principles. The first one being truth. So we always try to speak the truth of experience. Truth can take us beyond the social self. It is not about looking good. It's not about trying to be understood. It is about sensing deeply into ourselves and what is real to us.
So the second principle is an awareness of the body, and this is really key. So it's about staying very present with our bodies and being very, very curious about any sensations we feel.
Curiosity is a major element of inquiry. It can take us into the new instead of coming from, oh yeah, I already know this. We're all familiar with our stories. So curiosity can lead us into the new, into the truth as it is in the moment.
And we know from polyvagal theory that we can't be both curious and defensive and closed off at the same time. So being curious about what's happening in our bodies is really key to keeping us flowing with the inquiry. And the fourth principle is presence. So that applies whether we're the one inquiring and we're just very awake and aware of what's happening with ourselves. So almost like the container that everything else is happening in is our presence and our here at onceness. And then also when we're listening to someone, we're not just tuning out and thinking about what we're going to have for dinner later. We're really present with them and we're there with them, and we're also actively listening without interfering or making noises or interrupting in any way. So we're just a witnessing presence. So we can use inquiry to become aware of what's going on in the present moment. We can also use it to really go deep into a question. And so we're going to model going into a question, and we've chosen one based around sovereignty, which is going to be a big theme in the course, and it's, where do I lose my sovereignty? So usually it's nice to begin with just a moment of pause. Maybe just becoming aware of your breath for a few moments and just... Yeah, so where do I lose my sovereignty? Yeah, I notice that even as soon as I say the question, I feel this kind of tension and this feeling of actually not being entirely in my sovereignty in this moment. I'm noticing like a kind of a feeling of slight distraction, that I'm being pulled in a few different directions on a practical level. And even saying that brings up some anxiety for me. That's something where I feel I lose my center, is when there are maybe more than 4 things I have to do. And that I feel this pressure mounting and this anxiety of, which one do I do first? How do I sort of navigate well when I have multiple branches in front of me? Yeah, and that then comes up for me as an image, actually quite a vivid image in my mind's eye of a few different, say, tasks or a few different directions, and then a sense of myself sort of sitting here being watched by the cameras and by you. And yeah, I feel a pressure. It's interesting. It boils down to quite a simple word, pressure. And as soon as I just say that, the word, that something is relaxing a little bit. And I notice that my breath is coming a little bit deeper. Yeah, and pressure is something that I usually experience from the outside, but I also know that a huge part of it comes from myself. There's a huge part of it which is putting pressure on myself. And actually that really feels relaxing to say. To just speak that and notice that. Yeah, and there's like a kind of desire to pause as soon as I say it. And to just, I'm noticing my legs, and especially like my feet on the ground, and a feeling of really sitting on the chair, and a kind of slight shakiness I even notice in my voice as I'm talking, which is a certain kind of release of pressure I've been putting on myself for this particular film, for things I'm doing all week, things in my relationship, things out in the world. That is, yeah, there's something really, there's something kind of pressure releasing about noticing that this thing that I've externalized, just actually moments ago, was this kind of branching out, externalized thing coming into myself. There's a certain feeling of ownership of it, and actually a certain feeling of agency comes up as soon as I say the pressure's not outside, the pressure is pressure I'm putting on myself. Some kind of standards I'm holding myself to. The natural feeling is just that. It's just like a deep exhale. Yeah, and then a feeling as well of stillness that comes with that. And yeah, interestingly, a feeling of deeper sovereignty, a feeling of being able to meet challenges, not being sort of a victim of circumstance or a victim of my environment, but much more of a sense of, yeah, even as I say it, I still feel my feet on the ground, I still feel the chair beneath me, there's a kind of solidity to, it's all right. There's almost a pause and a space, because if I'm putting the pressure on myself, there is agency around that. I have agency around that. I can stop doing that as soon as I notice it. If the world is putting pressure on me, then I immediately have that sense of powerlessness and kind of a victim sense. So yeah, speaking that and connecting with that feels very, everything seems to just slow down a bit, and I feel much more present, more centered with it. And more present with you, actually, as I'm noticing, I feel myself dropping in a little bit deeper. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Yeah, when I sit with a question, I really felt touched by like what you shared, things that are alive in me as well, like the overwhelm. Like that can really bring me out of my sovereignty, where I basically feel that I can't meet other people's expectations. That is like a major one for me. Where I feel there is a part of my identity at stake of not being seen as competent, for example, and it's like I sense these invisible gazes of people, it's just a sense of being watched. And I'm actually feeling quite young in that. It's like I feel that quite a young part of me that gets activated, that has me not be myself. And again, I sense that my body reacts to that, like, oh, I have to kind of toughen up. I have to hold myself up, like by contracting, especially like around the belly, the solar plexus. That's a contraction that I'm very aware of, like around this issue. And the closer I get to falling out of sovereignty, the more I feel I have to hold myself up, with these contractions. Like the movement is always in my body of like clenching fists, and it's a mix of fear, like a bracing for an impact. Yeah, and I feel quite sad. Like there's this background of sadness, because there's just like an aloneness there as well. Like, yeah, I see that really key idea that is in the background there is like I have to do everything by myself. Like there's no support, there's nobody that helps me. I don't even know how to ask. Yeah, that like, yeah, especially the solar plexus, like it really is a quite a vulnerable place because it's small. It's like a boy, small boy. Yeah, it just transports me right back to childhood, and also the somatic wounding that I feel like it really lives in the body of having to be tough, by clenching here in the solar plexus, by pushing, and that's the that part that compensates for that weakness. Like it's the part that holds himself up and stays big. This is the face that I want to show to the world, like that I can hide behind. The way it's my defense for not showing that I've fallen out of sovereignty. But so yeah, I I also feel more naked, like here. It's safe with you. I sense that. It's really helpful. I sense that it's that I can share this here. And that's enough. Like I come now to this point where, oh yeah, I can just like let this be. I don't have to react or be different. It's fine too. I sense that as well. There's in this reality here and now, as me as a grown up, there's no real reason to be afraid. To use these defenses that I sense, like keeping up my front, showing a professional self, or it's not necessary. It feels real, like this is what I mean when I come to my truth. Like, yeah. Okay, thank you.